We got the Friday feelings on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And work as a fantasy GM doesn't stop. And that's why our NHL-wide breakdown continues with the Anaheim Ducks digging in the trenches for some fantasy gold. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back inside the lab to your weekly and daily source for fantasy hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. And on this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers. You know what it is. Salute, much love, and thank you so much for holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Even in the summertime right now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can still find brand new episodes of the show. And we cannot wait for September, back to a full court press, full ice press, if you will. 5 episodes a week in fantasy draft prep. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The summer, it's still hot as ever, and all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Steele, you know what it is. The listeners know what it is. 30 minutes or less. We try and get everyone in and out with the information that they need right now, breaking down every team in the NHL. We're not done yet. We're through half. Into Anaheim. Look, you got to dig into the trenches for fantasy gold. This is the angle here with this Anaheim Ducks team that I just mentioned to you off air. The come up, it's en route, but it's not this season. So maybe this is one of those invest now, wait for later type of angles for Keeper Dynasty. Hit me with your take. We're doing a top 5. I don't think you and I are going to have the same ones, but lots of intriguing angles to be had here. Hit me with your take. What are you looking at? Who are you looking at? And how are you feeling about this Ducks team?
Look, you got to dig deep to find some value on this Ducks roster. I mean, it is absolutely brutal out there. And you said it off the air, and you couldn't be more right. You know, this is maybe the deepest pool of prospects in the NHL. Lots to love in the prospect pool with young players. Cutter Gauthier being traded there. They pick up, they have Leo Carlsson from a couple years ago, top 3 draft pick. Troy Terry is still young. Trevor Zegras, who's dealt with injury. Mason McTavish, who I know you like a lot. There's many young players on this roster who can bring value in the next couple of years, but they don't bring it right now at the stage of their NHL career. So this is a very, very bad team, in my opinion. This is a team that I'm going to be staying away from the most part with a bunch of their players. I don't like really anybody on this roster right now for fantasy value.
Okay.
I mean, you can still find some in the later stages of the draft, but really there's not much to like about this team. A team that has struggled all the last couple of years. They were a bottom 3 team in goals for. They were a bottom 3 team in goals against. They were in the bottom 10 for power play percentage last year and special teams overall. I mean, this is just a very bad team. But the one guy who had the breakout season last year, Frank Vatrano, that is the guy who comes in at number 1 for me. And again, there's not much to like about this team right now, but after a career year, 60 points, 82 games, he's been healthy for the Anaheim Ducks the last 2 seasons. He's getting the most amount of deployment and opportunity ice time that he's seen ever throughout his NHL career. He had almost 18 and a half minutes of average ice time last year, and look what he did with it. 60 points, 37 goals, 156 hits, 78 blocks, 272 shots. Career highs in most every single category. He also had 85 penalty minutes. Speak about Banger League beauty. And even that himself, he wasn't a draftable player last year. That guy was picked up off the waiver wire more than anybody out there. And he finished the season, let me get it here, rostered at 78% on Yahoo. He was up there on ESPN as well. He wasn't a draftable player, but you picked him up and he just continued to dominate through the season and his value went through the roof. So for me, Frank Vatrano, I don't see him getting back to 37 goals this next year. Maybe 30 goals, but he's going to be the top player for them, even with, the skill set of Trevor Zegras, if he can stay healthy, the skill set of Troy Terry, Leo Carlsson being the top line center now. There's a lot of young talent up there, but with the peripherals that Frank Vatrano brings to the game, his value is way above theirs. He comes in at number 1. He's 29 years old. He has the most experience in the NHL. He's showcasing what he can do when he gets the ice time. So I have him at number 1. And honestly, you could probably get this player in the 7th or 8th round. I wouldn't take him any earlier than that.
I wouldn't say way above their value, especially when it comes to Mason McTavish. That's the only angle I'm going to say here, because also Mason McTavish had 67 hits in 64 games, 86 penalty minutes for Mason McTavish, and the offensive ceiling and caliber is so much higher with this player. Yes, he missed a good chunk of time. He missed 18 games. He still put up 42 points in 64 games. So let me get this very clear for everyone, and especially you, Mr. Roden, as I disagree with you here. Vatrano still comes in at number 1 for me, depending on the format of your league. Because if you're just looking
Fair
at
enough.
purely points-based league and not as many categories, for me, it is Mason McTavish. Because also, those line projections that I'm looking at right now, those will not be how those end up at the middle point or even to the start of the season. I really see the Ducks giving all kinds of looks for this forward group. So as much as Leo Carlsson slots in on the top line right now, I really do see Mason McTavish playing up there in the top 6. He's just far too good. He brings the size, he brings the tenacity, and those penalty minutes I'm absolutely loving. You also know, Steele, I'm going to stick to my guns on this player. So
Yeah.
on my list, I have Vatrano and Mason McTavish with an asterisk. It really depends on the format of your league, because you're so spot on with the peripherals with Frank Vatrano. Don't reach on this player is what I wanted to come on here and say, because I'm not as high on him as you, Steele, but replicating 37 goals is just not going to happen for a guy who previously topped out at 24, and that was back in 2019. So I'm with you. Not going to disagree in terms of where I'd place him. I just don't say he's that much more valuable than a guy like Mason McTavish, who I have coming in at 2, Steele. Hit me with your take on that, though, because all I have to say, and I'm trying not to be a broken record on this episode, is this Ducks team is still going to be so bad, and they are so young that the growing pains are going to be very real. So when I look at this Ducks roster loaded with young talent, I wanted to mention Mintyukov, Olin Zellweger, Tristan Leno. There's some other very intriguing names here. These are the guys that I'm looking at in Steele under the radar situations near the back end of drafts, or I'm investing in now in Keeper Dynasty and hoping that come up is very real in a couple of seasons, because it ain't happening over the next 1 or 2. That's for sure.
It really isn't. And that's why I'm struggling right here with even trying to figure out where these players are going to land in the draft. You know, Trevor Zegras being injured all of last season, Troy Terry taking a step back throughout his, in the last 2 years of his career. Mason McTavish not being able to stay healthy, missing 18 games, like you said. For me, Mason McTavish does come in at the number 2 spot as a fantasy target from this Anaheim Ducks team right now. Like you said, he put up back-to-back 40-plus point seasons now, one in a 43-point season in 80 games. He had 42 points in 64 games. So
only 21 years old as well.
Yeah, 21 years old, and maybe he is right there behind Frank Vatrano. I still think because of the peripherals that he brings, as of right now, Vatrano is more valuable as a fantasy player, even regardless of what format you're in. But Mason McTavish is showcasing that he can do it, on pace for over 55 points from last year. If he were to play a full 82 games, 86 penalty minutes, 67 shots, 33 blocks. He had a 14.6 shooting percentage with 130 shots on net. He's the second guy, and it's crazy to say, because again, when you look at what the Anaheim Ducks have had over the last couple of years, Troy Terry, career high 67 points 3 seasons ago. He's kind of fallen down. He went from 67 to 61 to 54. Hasn't yet played a full season in the NHL throughout his career. Trevor Zegras seems to have also an attitude problem and doesn't get the message from what the organization is trying to get from him. His head coach, his teammates, struggles on the both ends of the ice. So right now, Mason McTavish is the second guy in line right behind Vatrano. And
thank you.
Really, I don't even think you can take McTavish until the 10th or 11th round. Like, that's where I am putting him at right now. I wouldn't put him any higher, just because, again, the lack of peripherals, again, didn't play a full 82 games last year.
He's young.
Love to see. He's young. He's 21 years old. This is a young team. But for me, I can't stress this enough that I am not looking at any of these players unless they really fall down the draft board. I don't want anybody. Frank Vatrano last year being picked up off the waiver wire like that was like a blue moon. It's a rarity that something like that happens. And if you picked him up, you probably won your league because he was phenomenal last year.
Fool's gold, Steel. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the minor moves they made in the offseason. Some more of these young guns. We haven't even talked about the crease. Another player that I've had my eye on for quite some time, and Lukas Dostal. We'll break it all down, including the rest of our top 5, quote unquote, air quotes on that one, Mr. Roden. Top 5 fantasy list on the Anaheim Ducks. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, exhaust kits, and a whole lot more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to fit your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, and all the parts at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, make sure you go enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The team that we power through on today's episode are the Anaheim Ducks and their fantasy value, top 5 targets going into next season, potential players to stay away from, potential players to keep an eye out for. Again, fool's gold and Vatrano last year being picked up like that all the way.
Well,
up
you
to
like
78%.
that one? You like the fool's gold description?
The fool's gold, that was great. That was right on the nail. A great description of what happened last year with his fantasy value, and it worked out for everybody who picked him up. If you picked him up, you probably honestly did pretty well at the end of your fantasy league, or at the end of your fantasy league. But we're moving forward with the top 3, the bottom 3 positions right now. Frank Vatrano and Mason McTavish coming at 1 and 2. Number 3 on the list. I think this is maybe where you and I get separated a little bit. If I had to assume, you probably put Lukas Dostal. I'm going with Troy Terry at the number 3 position.
Troy Terry as well, Mr.
Oh, okay. We're on the same page again.
It might be the Hep B booster shot throwing fluid through my veins right now. But hey, I don't know. Like, look, you tell me what you think first, then I'll go. How about that?
Yeah, look. Again, there's not lots of value to be had with this team, but I'm going with more of the offensive production that this team is capable of. The safer choice. Really, if you look at it, I look at it 2 ways ahead of taking Troy Terry ahead of Dawson. Number 1 is you still got John Gibson in the crease, who still gets half the games played there. Number 2 is this team is a liability in their own end. They were a bottom 3 team in goals against. They face a lot of shots. They let a lot of goals in. That's not a great thing for goaltenders on the Anaheim Ducks. That's why John Gibson has never really been fantasy relevant for the last 4 to 5 years now. So that's why I'm going with Troy Terry over goaltenders right now, especially Lukas Dostal. I know he's got potential to do some pretty good things in Anaheim if he can get that number 1 job. But Troy Terry, over the last couple of years, again, hasn't been able to play a full 82-game regular season, but 3 straight seasons of 70-plus games played. 3 straight seasons of 30-plus assists. He had that 37-goal year. If he can get back to 30 goals, which was his career high, would love to see that too. Peripherals, a lot to be desired with this player. Only 30 blocks, 17 hits. He's not a physical player. He doesn't get in front of the puck a lot. Again, 172 shots last year. Troy Terry, for me, I could see him getting back to 25, maybe 30 goals. I think he is more of a what's the word I'm looking for? He's more of a very sneaky playmaker than he is a showcasing skill set type of guy. He does have the stick handling ability to, be a TSN turning point highlight reel type of player sometimes, which we've seen him do in the past. But again, I'm struggling to put these players in position right now because of the value that I'm holding them at. I really I don't want any of these players on my fantasy team unless they're at the bottom 5 rounds of the draft. Troy Terry, for me, he's fallen somewhere in the 14th, 15th round. I just don't like a lot of the value that the Anaheim Ducks bring this season. I know that they've got a lot of young talent and a lot of young players to work with, and they're going to get their own. They're going to showcase their skill set. However, for me personally, I'm not feeling it with this Ducks roster. For me, Troy Terry comes in at number 3.
I've got him at number 3 as well. And just to back you up, I can tell with how we're even struggling to put words here, because also, let's be honest, and I'll speak for myself. Trying to watch Anaheim Ducks hockey on the best of time zones and on the best of evenings is difficult enough. But for you and I on the East Coast, sitting here trying to stay up till 10:30 to watch the Ducks lose 6 and 7 and 8-0 every night. Look, I'm not trying to throw hate on a team in a full rebuild with lots of interesting young names on the come up. And Lukas Dostal does come in at 4 for me, Steele. And I'll explain it to you in a second. Troy Terry comes in at 3. It's the safer play. It's a guy that scored 37 goals in the NHL in 75 games only 2 seasons ago. Is he much more in the 25 to 30 goal realm? Maybe 20 to 25? Perhaps, but on this team, that means he should probably come in at number 3 again, depending on the format. If it's just a purely points league, not many categories, he's definitely in at number 3. Look, Lukas Dostal in 44 games last year, Steele, had very good numbers considering how much rubber he saw, and I'll get to that in a second. I know it doesn't jump off the page, but anything over 900 on this Ducks team is sensational for a guy who's only 23 years old. 3.33 goals against. I know it's not good, but again, considering that he saw, Steele, over 1,300 shots of rubber. The goalies right ahead of him on this list, almost all number 1 goaltenders, including his tandem mate, John Gibson, who saw over 1,300 himself. However, this is just me and a guy that I've had my eye on now for a number of seasons. He's taken a little while to develop, in my opinion. And again, this is my humble opinion. This is his year, regardless of what happens. He will take that crease in Anaheim. All the points that we've already raised, I get it. It makes him a very risky option. So maybe I'm looking at this more from a purely keeper dynasty side of things. He definitely should be a top 4 or 5 off the board for the Ducks. Just so hard to peg. Once again, just not to sound completely like a broken record, the back end has a lot of young pieces, which I want to talk about right after the break, but that is going to lead to even more shots on net per game, perhaps, Steele, and even more goals against. So it's a deep cut. I love Dostal. I'm sticking to my guns. I would take him over a number of other young pieces, but I'm taking him at 4. That's just me. I see 50-plus starts from him this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I don't have him at number 4. Again, I'm really valuing the offensive side of things with this Anaheim Ducks thing because I don't trust them in their own zone. And I really don't trust either John Gibson or Dostal to make the save that they need to make in a game decision, in a game tying or a game winning decision game. I'm putting more focus and more emphasis on the forward group right now. I'm not even looking at defense. I'm not even looking at defensemen right now. I'll get to my 4th pick and 5th pick for fantasy targets from this Ducks team coming up next. Still lots of things to talk about with this Ducks roster. They're going to be bad next year. That's all I know. They are going to be a bottom 5 team in the NHL, but hopefully that turns around in the next couple of seasons. Lots of things to like with the young prospects, but they're too young. They're inexperienced and struggle in the defensive zone. We're going to get to all of that and more coming up next. But this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. We absolutely love sports on this podcast. We love them so much. We never want them to stop. But as the NHL playoffs are over, the NBA playoffs are over, we get to watch the Olympics now. We get to bet on the Olympics, and that's absolutely fantastic. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want this summer. All I have to do is open the app and dream up any bets when I'm in the right mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking us all up with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Thank you for correcting me there, Flip. In the month of August, 3 days a week throughout the month of August, and then we'll be ramping back up to 5 days a week starting in September. Flip, I'm going with a shot in the dark here. I'm going with Leo Carlsson at number 4.
I don't think that's a shot in the dark at all, pal. So please
perfect.
go ahead.
Because because there's still Trevor Zegras to talk about. Cutter Gauthier being maybe on that top line or the top 6 forward group. I'm going with the number 1 center right now, Leo Carlsson. Even with the short stint last year, injuries. That was his. I guess not even. He didn't even play a full season. 29 points in 55 games, though. Over 18 minutes of average ice time. 109 shots, 25 blocks, 28 hits. That's who I'm going with in this position. I don't know much about him. I need to look more into his professional career, some highlights as well. Again, I don't watch a lot of Anaheim Ducks games to know about his game per se, but I know where the potential lies with this player fantasy wise as well. He would be the 4th one I'm looking at. Again, I need to do a little bit more of a dive into his professional career to see where the potential is. I know, again, top 3 draft pick in his draft class, but Leo Carlsson comes in at number 4 for me off the fantasy board. I'm still not even looking at him until, I don't even know, like 16th, 17th round. Like he's still at the back end of this draft for me. I'm not looking at Ducks players. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not looking at them.
He's one of those guys, Steele, that I think you've heard out of my mouth before. What I like to do in most leagues that I'm in, almost all, instead of going with a name perhaps or a veteran player that holds more value in fantasy just by what they have done, not what they're going to do, and it might be a safer move by drafting them as like your security blanket forward or D-man, I like going with the young guns that might still be around in those leagues that have not as many GMs. Let me spit it out. Leo Carlsson comes in at 5 for me. And looking into his ability as a playmaker, a versatile forward who really can play both the center and the wing. Of course, just like all 19-year-olds, or a lot of them anyway, coming out of Europe, he could put on a little bit more bulk, but he's 6'3". And I think the second he gets a little bit more aggressive and finds his confidence, the sky is the limit for the number 2 overall draft pick from just a season ago. And look, I think I had that up. Why did I? Yeah. So he was drafted ahead of Steele. Good players like Adam Fantilli, Matvei Michkov, Will Smith. These are some really good young players that the Anaheim Ducks made sure they got Leo Carlsson. So maybe I'm reading into that more than I should. That tells me this Ducks franchise is very, very high on this player. So am I. And I want a piece of it now. Like I said, invest now, thank us later. Leo Carlsson's right at the top of that list. Hit me with your 5 because I got a couple of young players here. Mintyukov, Zellweger, Cutter Gauthier you mentioned. Those are going to be some sneaky good fantasy keeper dynasty realm ads that I absolutely love as well. However, like you said, very, very wary of taking any Ducks member. So why don't you hit me with your 5th and let's wrap this bad boy up with a bow.
Yeah, number 5, it's a toss-up between who's going to be the starting goaltender for me. I know you like Dostal, and I'm going to go with Dostal at the number 5 position just because he's younger. He had the better stats last year. And again, like you said, having a above 900,
I'm telling you,
a 900 save percentage, and a below 3.50 goals against average, that's pretty great, honestly, all things considered, with what happened last year, being a bottom team in goals against, bottom team in goals for, and struggling just overall in the defensive zone. He's going to be that number 5 fantasy target off the board for the Ducks. Again, I'm not even looking at him maybe I draft him as a 3rd string goaltender for my roster, but even in a categorical league, I don't want someone who's on a team. If it's do or die, I'll take him, but I'm still staying away from Ducks players. I'm staying away from goaltenders in this position. But he will come in at number 5 for me. I'm not even looking at him until at least the 18th round. I know he's probably going to get taken higher because there's going to be a lot of GMs out there who need goaltenders at some point in the draft. He might be one of the more better ones out there in the later
Mm.
stages. But
Mm.
again, I've said it before. I'm saying it again. I'm staying away from Ducks players.
If there is one player that I would throw out there that I think you and I have kind of touched on a little bit, 34th overall pick from a couple of years ago, Olen Zellweger.
Yeah.
In 2 years in the Dubs, the same last year he was in the Dubs, split between the Everett Silvertips and Kamloops Blazers, he had 80 points in 55 games. And then in San Diego this year in the A Steel, he proved he can play at this level. And I know the AHL isn't the NHL, but if my man's getting 37 points in 44 games, I'm really liking his ability to crack this roster and earn big minutes. Mintyukov, another good young defenseman. Jackson Lacombe, another good young defenseman. What do they do this year, Steele? I don't know, but if I had to peg one that I really like, it's Olen Zellweger. I think he's going to have sneaky good offensive value. And again, maybe not this year, next year or the year after, they're going to boom. Right now, though, it's really hard to peg these five. Vatrano, McTavish, Troy Terry, Leo Carlsson. Those are the ones. And then Dostal maybe after that. Those are the five that I think you and I can both agree on. That's what you go after if you are doing that.
Yeah, those are the 5 targets for the Anaheim Ducks. I quickly just want to, again, Olen Zellweger, and we're going to keep an eye for Cutter Gauthier as well, and the other young prospects in there. I just want to quickly touch on Trevor Zegras because he doesn't make the top 5. Look, this is still a guy who I'm fine with if you're going out to draft. I mean, I mentioned it before. There's definitely a problem in between the ears right now. He's a defensive liability. The giveaway to takeaway ratio is absolutely disgusting with this player. Look, he took the league by storm with the creativity and the skill set that he came into the league offensively. The Michigan that he continues to do, throwing the puck over the net to Sonny Milano, who bats it in. Like, highlight real stuff from Trevor Zegras, being on the cover of the NHL. What was it? NHL 22, NHL 23 cover.
23 with Sarah Nurse.
Yeah. Like, he took the league by storm with the creativity that he brings to this level. And there was lots to like about his game. I'm worried about his size. I'm worried about his physicality. I'm worried about his strength being pushed off the puck. Again, the giveaway to takeaway ratio is not great at all. He's a defensive liability. Obviously, there's a lot more upside to his game in the offensive zone. He has potential to be a 30 goal scorer. We haven't seen it yet. He's still more of a playmaker. He actually brings the penalty minutes. I don't want to call him a banger league beauty because he doesn't get any hits out there. But look, 50 penalty minutes in his second year, 88 penalty minutes in his third season, and he had 30 penalty minutes in 31 games last year. So if that's a category in your league and he can play a full season, he's going to get goals, assists, points, penalty minutes, shots on net. Still hasn't reached 200, but I would be fine going after a guy like Trevor Zegras. But I think there's so many problems with this player as a fantasy player for your team that it's going to hurt you in the long run. So again, I'm fine in the later stages of drafting this player, but I'm still staying away from a guy like that.
I'm really glad that you brought him up, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because I think you and I are going to have to talk about this player because he's the kind of player that I have a feeling just when you count him out completely, which is not exactly what you and I are doing, but fantasy-wise, really hard to invest in a guy that has a bunch of different risks with him from, I don't want to say injuries because he is such a young player, but definitely the between the ears situation, his attitude. He takes a lot of dumb penalties, which obviously eat into his deployment. So is he perhaps right there on the cusp of this list? For sure, because of what he can potentially do offensively. And maybe he's going to make us both look really bad, Steele. I could see that coming. We've been wrong before once or twice. I don't know, though, but hey, he's going to get an opportunity. So maybe he's that guy that you want to take a risk on if you don't have a ton of offensive flair on your team as your last forward or, your bench spot, something like that. Week to week, I have a feeling we'll be talking about him on the waiver wire because coming into this draft season, I have a feeling you and I aren't the only ones treating this guy with a little bit of caution.
We got the 6 feet distance away from this player when we're talking about draft boards and drafting him. We're getting after it on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We hope you're enjoying your summer out there. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Once again, go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also find them on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets this summer, and we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.